Meditation. Children on the country road. I could hear the carts driving past the garden fence. Sometimes I even caught sight of them through the gently shifting gaps in the foliage. How the wood of their spokes and shafts creaked in the summer heat. Labourers were coming in from the fields and laughing so that it was a scandal. I was sitting on our little swing, just having a rest among the trees in my parents' garden. Beyond the fence there was never a pause. Children running by were past in a moment, harvest wagons with men and women perched on the sheaves, and round them darkened the flower beds. Towards evening I saw a gentleman with a walking stick out for a stroll, and a party of girls coming arm in arm the other way stepped aside into the grass as they greeted him. Then birds flew up like a shower of sparks. I followed them with my eyes and saw how they rose in a single breath until they seemed no longer to be rising, but I too be falling. And holding fast to the ropes, I began to swing a little out of faintness. Soon I was swinging more strongly as the air grew cooler, and in place of the flying birds, trembling stars appeared. I was given my supper by candlelight. Often I had both my arms on the wooden board, and I was already weary as I bit into my bread and butter. The wide mesh curtains billowed in the warm wind, and now and then someone going by outside would hold them fast with both hands if he wanted to see me better and speak to me. Usually the candles soon went out, and the midges which had gathered went on circling for a while in the dark candle smoke. If someone asked me something from the window, I would look at him as if I were staring at the mountains or into thin air, not that he much cared about an answer anyway. But if one of them jumped over the windowsill and announced that the others were waiting in front of the house, then indeed I did get up with a sigh. Come on now, what are you sighing for? Whatever's happened? Is it some specially awful, fatal disaster? Shan't we ever be able to get over it? Can really all be lost? Nothing was lost. We ran out to the front of the house. Thank heavens, there you are at last. You're always late. Why pick on me? Because it's always you. Stay at home if you don't want to come. No mercy. What? No mercy. What kind of talk is that? We plunged into the evening head first. There was no daytime and no nighttime. Now our jacket buttons were clicking against one another like teeth. Now we kept a steady distance between us as we ran, breathing fire like tropical beasts, like cuirassiers in ancient wars, stamping and leaping high. We chased one another down the short village street and then, carried by our legs, up along the main country road. Some of the party dropped off singly into the roadside ditch. Hardly had they vanished against the dark embankment when there they stood up on the field path like strangers looking down. Come on down. First, you come up, so you can push us down? Not likely, we're not that stupid. You mean you're too scared? Come on up, come on. Scared of you? Push us down, will you? Some hope. We made our attack, got a push in the chest and collapsed into the grassy ditch, falling of our own free will. Everything had the same mildness. We felt neither warmth nor chill in the grass, just weariness setting in. If you turned on your right side and put a hand under your ear, you felt like falling asleep, and yet you wanted to struggle to your feet again with your chin in the air, but only so as to fall into a deeper ditch, and you wanted to go on like that forever. What it might feel like to stretch right out, stretching your legs above all, for a proper sleep in the final ditch. That was something you barely thought of as yet, as you lay on your back like an invalid, half inclined to tears. You blinked whenever one of the boys, with his elbows tucked in, leapt across you with his dark soles from the bank to the roadway. You could already see the moon quite high in the sky. In its light, a mail coach drove past. All around, a gentle breeze got up. Even in the ditch, you could feel it, and the forest nearby began to rustle, and you no longer wanted so much to be alone. Where have you got to? This way. Everyone, collect. What are you hiding for? Don't be a fool. Don't you know the mail coach has gone by already? Oh no, gone already? Of course, it went past while you were asleep. Me? Asleep? What rubbish. Oh, shut up. Anyone can tell you were. No, honestly. Oh, come on. We kept closer now as we ran. Many of us held hands. We couldn't hold our heads up high enough, for now it went downhill. Someone whooped an Indian war cry. Our legs found a gallop as never before. The wind gave a lift to our hips as we sprang in the air. Nothing could have checked us. We were going so strongly that even when overtaking, we could fold our arms and look calmly around us. At the bridge over the mountain stream, we halted. Those who had run ahead came back. Below us, the water dashed against the stones and rocks as if it were not already late evening. There was no reason why one of us shouldn't jump on the parapet of the bridge. In the distance, a railway train emerged from behind a clump of trees. All the carriages were lit up, and no doubt the windows were down. One of us started to sing a popular song, but then we all wanted to sing. We sang much faster than the train was going. We swung our arms because our voices weren't enough. We got our voices into a scrum that delighted us. When you mix your voice with others, you are caught like a fish on a hook. So we sang, with the forest at our backs for the ears of the distant travellers. In the village, the grown-ups were still awake. Our mothers were preparing the beds for the night. Now it was time. I kissed the boy standing nearest me, just gave my hand to the next three, and set off on my way home. Nobody called me back. At the first crossroads where they could no longer see me, I turned off and ran by field paths back into the forest again. I was making for that town in the south of which it is said in our village. There's strange folk there. Just think, they never sleep. And why is that? Because they don't get tired. And why is that? Because they're fools. Don't fools get tired? How could fools get tired? Unmasking a Confidence Trickster. At last I arrived, about 10 in the evening, outside the grand house where I was invited to a party, accompanied by a man who was already slightly known to me from earlier occasions, and who had attached himself to me again out of the blue, dragging me through the streets for 2 whole hours. Well now, said I, and clapped my hands to indicate the absolute necessity of parting company. I had made a number of less decisive efforts before. By now I was tired out. Are you going straight on up? He asked. From his mouth came a sound like the chattering of teeth. Yes. After all, I was invited. I had told him that at the outset, but I had been invited to mount the steps to where I now so dearly wished to be, not to stand down here outside the gate staring past the ears of my opposite number. Nor indeed to fall silent with him now, as if we had determined on a prolonged occupation of this spot. It was a silence, moreover, in which the surrounding houses at once took the part, and the darkness above them right up to the stars. And the footsteps of invisible strollers whose routes one had no desire to guess, the wind that kept pressing itself against the other side of the street, a gramophone that was singing up against the closed windows of some room. These made themselves heard out of this silence as if it belonged to them for all time past and to come. And my companion submitted to all this on his own behalf, and, after a smile, on mine too. He stretched out his right arm along the top of the wall and rested his cheek on it, closing his eyes. But I never saw that smile through to the end, for shame suddenly whirled me around. It had taken that smile for me to recognize that the man was a confidence trickster, nothing more. And yet I had been in this town for months by now, had supposed I knew these confidence tricksters through and through, the way they come out of side streets at night to meet us, with their arms outstretched like innkeepers, the way they sidle round the advertising pillar by which we're standing as if playing hide and seek, and spy on us round the curve of the column with at least one eye, the way that they suddenly, when we become nervous at a street crossing, hover in front of us on the edge of our pavement. For I understood them so well. Indeed, they had been my first acquaintances in the town's small taverns, and to them I owed my first glimpse of an obduracy which by now formed so much a part of my world that I was beginning to detect it in myself. How persistently they went on facing you, even when you had long since eluded them, so that there was nothing left for them to trick. How they refused to sit down, how they failed to collapse, but instead kept on sending you those looks which still remain compelling, if only from a distance. And their methods were always the same. They planted themselves in front of us, as broad as could be, tried to head us off from where we wanted to go, offered us in exchange a dwelling in their own breasts, and if our pent-up feelings finally burst out, they received them like an embrace into which they flung themselves face foremost. And this time it had taken me so long in the man's company to spot the old games. I rubbed my fingertips firmly together to undo the disgrace of it. But meanwhile, this fellow of mine was still propping himself up here as before, still regarding himself as a confidence trickster, and satisfaction with his lot glowed pink on his exposed cheek. "Found out," said I, and gave him a gentle tap on the shoulder. Then I hurried up the steps, and in the anteroom above the groundless devotion on the servants' faces rejoiced my heart like a pleasant surprise. I looked at them all in turn while they took my coat and dusted off my boots. Then, with a sigh of relief and drawing myself up to my full height, I strode into the hall. Resolutions. To raise oneself out of the depths of misery must be easy, even with a studied display of energy. I will wrench myself out of my chair, trot around the table, loosen up my head and neck, inject a gleam into my eyes, tauten the muscles surrounding them, defy all my natural feelings, give an enthusiastic welcome if he comes, tolerate B amicably in a room, swallow down everything that is said at C's. placing long drafts despite the labour and pain it costs me. Yet even if I can manage all that, each false step, and they're bound to occur, will make the whole enterprise easy or difficult. Falter, and I shall have to turn back to the point where I began. So in the end, it remains advisable to accept whatever comes, to behave like an inert mass even if one feels oneself being swept away. Not to be lured into a single unnecessary step, to regard others with the gaze of an animal, to feel no remorse. In short, to crush with one's own hand any ghost of life that subsists, that is, to intensify the final quiet of the grave still further and let nothing beyond that endure. A characteristic gesture in such a condition is to run one's little finger along one's eyebrows. The excursion into the mountains. I don't know, was my soundless cry. I really do not. If nobody comes, well then nobody comes. I've done nobody harm, nobody's harmed me, yet nobody wants to help me. Just nobody, but that's not quite how it is. It's simply that nobody helps me. Apart from that, just nobody would be fine. I'd really quite like to make an excursion, and why not, with a party of just nobodies. Into the mountains, of course. Where else? How these nobodies crowd together. All these manifold arms stretched out crosswise and linked together, all these manifold feet with tiny paces between them. It goes without saying that they all wear evening dress. We don't get along too badly. The wind blows through the gaps that we and our limbs leave open. Our throats become clear in the mountains. It's a wonder we don't start singing. The fate of the Batchelor. It seems so dreadful to remain a bachelor, to become an old man who must beg for hospitality with such dignity as he can muster each time he wants to spend an evening in human company. To be ill and stare for weeks on end at an empty room from your bed in the corner. Always have to say your goodbyes outside the front door. Never to scurry upstairs with your wife at your side. To have in your room only side doors that lead into other people's flats. To carry home your supper in your hand. To have to gaze in wonder at strange children and not be allowed constantly to repeat, "I do not have any." To model yourself in appearance and behaviour on one or two bachelors remembered from your youth. That's how it will be, except that there you will stand in stark reality, each every day and from that day forward, with a body and a real hand, that's to say a forehead too, for you to beat upon with your hand. The businessman. It is possible that some people may feel sorry for me, but I see no sign of it. My small business fills me with worries that make my forehead and my temples ache, but without these offering any prospect of satisfaction, because my business is small. Hours in advance I have to make my dispositions. I have to keep refreshing the storekeeper's memory, warn against mistakes that I fear may be made, and calculate each season the fashions of the next one. Not as these may hold among the people of my circle, but among inaccessible tribes of folk in the country. My money is in the hands of strangers. Their circumstances must remain a mystery to me. I cannot foresee what disaster might befall them. How could I avert it? Perhaps they have grown extravagant and are giving a banquet in some garden restaurant, and others are stopping off at this party before making good their escape to America. When I come to lock up my premises at the end of a working day and suddenly see hours stretching ahead of me in which I shall be able to do nothing to meet the incessant demands of my business, then the excitement which I had projected so far into the future that morning comes flooding back into me like an incoming tide. But it cannot contain itself there and sweeps me away again aimlessly with it. And yet I can turn this mood to no purpose and can only go home, for my face and hands are dirty and sweaty, my coat stained and dusty. I am wearing my working cap and my boots are all scratched with the nails of crates. I move off them like a man afloat, snapping the fingers of both my hands and stroking the hair of the children I meet. But the way is too short. I am home in no time. I open the door of the lift and step in. I find that I am now, quite suddenly, alone. Others who have to climb stairs get a bit tired as they climb. They have to wait with panting breath for someone to open the door of their flat, which gives cause for irritation and impatience. Now they enter the hall where they hang up their hat, and it's not until they have got down the passage past several glass doors and into their room that they are alone. But I am alone in the lift right away, and propped on my knees I gaze into the narrow mirror. As the lift begins to ascend, I say, "Now, keep still, all of you. Now stand back. Would you like to disappear into the shade of the trees, behind the drapery at the windows, into the vaulted arcade?" I am talking to my teeth, and the banisters of the staircase float down past the panes of frosted glass like a waterfall. Fly away then. May your wings, which I have never yet seen, carry you off to the country valley or off to Paris if you feel so inclined. But make the most of the view from the window when the processions converge out of the three streets at once, not giving way but threading through one another and letting the square open out again between their parting ranks. Wave your handkerchiefs, be appalled, be touched, praise the beautiful lady driving past. Cross over the stream by the wooden bridge, nod to the children bathing and gasp at the cheer that rises from 1,000 sailors on the distant warship. Just you follow the inconspicuous little man, and when you have pushed him into a doorway, rob him and then watch him, each with your hands in your pockets, as he goes sorrowfully on his way down the left-hand street. The scattered police on their galloping horses rein in their mounts and force you back. Let them. The empty streets will dishearten them, I know. What did I tell you? They're riding off in pairs already, slowly round the street corners, flying across the squares. Then I have to get out, send the lift down again, ring the doorbell, and the maid opens the door while I wish her good evening.